Hello, I'm Angelique Prince, Director of Prevention Programs and Services at WorkSafe BC. In this video, I'll walk you through the written first aid assessment that must be completed for every workplace in BC as of November 1st, 2024. I'm speaking to BC employers throughout this video. However, BC workers, first aid training providers, first aid attendants, and Joint Health and Safety Committee members will also find this information helpful. Employers, you have a duty to ensure your workplace has an appropriate level of first aid services available to promptly treat and transport injured workers to medical aid. You'll do this through a two-part first aid assessment. In Part 1 of the assessment, you'll determine the minimum levels of first aid required at your workplace. This is based on the hazard rating, location, and accessibility of your workplace, as well as the number of workers. In Part 2 of the assessment, you'll evaluate any circumstances unique to your workplace to determine if additional first aid equipment, supplies, facilities, attendants, and services are necessary. Both parts must be documented in a first aid assessment. In addition, the assessment must be completed in consultation with the Joint Health and Safety Committee or worker representative. If your workplace is smaller and you don't have a joint committee or a worker representative, you should still involve workers when you do your assessment. You're required to review and update the written assessment annually. You'll also need to update it whenever there's a significant change in your operations that impacts the assessment. We've developed a fillable worksheet you can use to document your first aid assessment. To complete your workplace first aid assessment, download the first aid assessment worksheet from worksafebc.com and complete it in consultation with your workers. As you work through the first aid assessment worksheet, you'll notice 4 factors that determine your minimum levels of first aid. The first factor is the number of workers at your workplace. All workers who regularly attend the workplace must be included in the worker count. Your industry hazard rating is also a factor. Hazard ratings are assigned to the classification unit that your business belongs to. You can find your classification unit description in your annual rate assessment letter, or the hazard rating associated with your classification unit can be found at worksafebc.com. The remoteness of your workplace is a determining factor. A workplace is remote if it takes more than 30 minutes to drive there from the nearest BC EHS ambulance station. The final factor is accessibility. A less accessible workplace includes workplaces that can't be accessed by an ambulance traveling by land. It also includes workplaces with hazardous areas where an ambulance attendant may not be able to access or transport an injured worker safely. For detailed information on remote and less accessible workplaces, please see our video on the topic. The remoteness and accessibility of your workplace determines your workplace class. Your workplace class, industry hazard rating, and total number of workers determine the minimum first aid requirements for your workplace. These requirements are laid out in Schedule 3A of the Occupational Health and Safety Regulation. There, you'll see the minimum requirements for first aid facilities, equipment, attendance, and transportation. To complete your assessment, you also need to consider any unique workplace factors that may impact or delay the provision of first aid or emergency transport to medical treatment. This is the part of the assessment where you should consult with your workers. Workers are in the best position to inform you of hazards associated with the task being performed, incidents that have occurred in the past, and potential challenges they may experience when accessing the workplace. Employers should encourage meaningful involvement of the Joint Committee or worker representatives to establish the appropriate level of first aid equipment, training, and supplies. Meaningful consultation includes things like involving your workers, Joint Committee, or worker representative in workplace inspections and walkthrough surveys, giving them information on injuries and incidents that your business has experienced in the past, or discussing previous incident responses and drills to evaluate the effectiveness of current procedures and services. For smaller workplaces, or when conducting first aid assessments for dispatch crews, you might request worker input on the first aid assessment during pre-job safety meetings or toolbox talks. Or you could explore options for participation in the assessment process by telephone or video call. Talking about the hazards and injuries typical of your industry may also be useful. You'll find this information at worksafebc.com/shared-data. You must consider enhancing first aid services when hazards are identified that are unique to the workplace or workers, or not typical of your classification unit. Another factor to consider is the types of injuries that you can reasonably expect at the workplace. Information on the types of injuries that have previously occurred at your workplace or similar workplaces can be found from your past first aid records, incident reports and claims history, industry health and safety associations, WorkSafe BC statistics, and other research. A third factor you must consider is the barriers that could potentially limit or delay a worker's access to first aid. If your workplace is less accessible, you're expected to maintain the equipment necessary to safely move an injured worker to an area accessible to first aid attendants and ambulance personnel. Finally, you must also consider barriers that you know may affect ambulance response times or the time it takes to transport an injured worker to a hospital. In some cases, based on the risk assessment, the minimum levels of first aid laid out in Schedule 3A may be adequate. But in other situations, additional first aid attendants, higher levels of certification, or additional first aid equipment or supplies may be required to properly respond to a first aid emergency. For details and guidance on these factors, see the Occupational First Aid Guidelines available on worksafebc.com/first aid.